The 2024 season was a long one and it was filled with plenty of drama, big breakthroughs,
BMW Team RLL are victorious,
and plenty of excitement.
as is the rain. It's teeming down again on the front straight.
Is pouring down here. There's actual hydroplaning in the pit lane.
But putting the 2024 season in the rearview mirror and looking ahead to the 2025 season brings us many unanswered questions. Today, I'm going to talk about 5 of the biggest unanswered questions so far of the Imsa offseason. One of the biggest and most anticipated debuts of the 2024 season was the Lamborghini SC63. The 5th manufacturer to join Imsa's GTP class sure had their fair share of obstacles to make it to the grid, as they experienced practice crashes, as well as further delays that ultimately led them to miss the season-opening Rolex 24. The results of the car in 2024 certainly didn't blow anybody away, but easily the highlight of the season came in the second to last race of the year, where the car led laps in the rain at Indianapolis. Now, the car has had some well-documented issues, many of which stem from a massive practice accident that the car sustained in testing last year and greatly hindered its development. And 2025 will bring a vastly different year for the SC63, as Lamborghini will not be present on the WEC grid with their SC63 or in the LMGT3 class. Now, a recent Daily Sports Car article, which I'll link in the show notes, cites that the team which operated the 2024 program, Iron Lynx, felt increased irritation with Lamborghini, and also makes mention of significant development that's needed for the car to become more competitive. Now, with Lamborghini withdrawing from the World Endurance Championship, it begs the question, what is the brand's future in Imsa? Now, based on this report from Daily Sports Car, as well as other reputable sources around the sport, it doesn't sound like the Lamborghini program in Imsa is going anywhere. And the fact that the 2025 GTD Pro effort for Lamborghini will be under the name Automobili Lamborghini may have been an indicator that this has been in the works for a little bit. Alright, so indications are we're not going to see the GTP car go anywhere. Indications are we're not going to see the GTD Pro car go anywhere. But in the end, could this announcement that Lamborghini's withdrawing from the World Endurance Championship actually benefit their Imsa efforts? That very well may be the case, as the discussions now are, could Lamborghini step up to a full season ride with their SC63? Or could they even bring an additional SC63 to the grid in a full season capacity, in addition to their already committed Michelin Endurance Cup effort? This is all very much a possibility right now. Adding further fuel to this speculation was a comment that John Doonan made back at Petit Le Mans. He said to Sports Car 365 when asked about a 49th full season entry on the grid that it's being confirmed internally right now. We're very excited. Now, of course, a second Lamborghini is absolutely not mentioned in that quote, but I think we'd all agree that a full season Lamborghini, a second Lamborghini, would be extremely exciting for the sport as a whole. And it also sure doesn't hurt that despite it only being a test, the SC63 actually performed pretty well in the recent Imsa sanction test at Daytona. The car, driven by Robin Grosjean, put down a 135.611 in the test, which was the fastest time of the weekend. That's not too shabby for a car that's going to be heading to the Rolex 24 for the first time in January, and just maybe, if we're fortunate enough, we'll see a second SC63 on the grid. One of the most successful teams in Imsa history is expanding. And when the 2025 entry list was first announced at Road Atlanta, it was a pretty big surprise to see that Pratt Miller Motorsport was on there with an LMP2 effort. After all, this is a team that's become very well known with the very successful Corvette racing program. However, it now looks like they're venturing back into the prototype ranks, which is actually something that they've dabbled with in the past. The team actually started out by racing the Chevrolet Intrepid GTP in the early 90s. So they do have some experience, albeit it was a little while ago, with some prototype cars. Now, I think at this point it's pretty obvious that Pratt Miller are some of the best in the business, and they're very likely to be successful in whatever series and class that they enter in. But the addition of this program begs the question, what does Pratt Miller have their eyes on for the future? When asked about this, Pratt Miller Motorsports Vice President of Motorsports, Brandon Widmer, told Sportscar 365 that they're looking to grow their footprint in Imsa, and that there are, quote, no immediate plans there, but LMP2 certainly shares some similarities with prototype racing in general, and I certainly would put us in a strong position to pursue GTP in the future. Interesting stuff there, a Pratt Miller GTP program in the future? I think that would turn some heads. But in the meantime, the team has also confirmed their first 2 drivers for their LMP2 program next year. Pietro Fittipaldi and James Rowe were confirmed, as Fittipaldi brings with him experience from his multiple seasons running LMP2 equipment, and while not confirmed in this announcement, I wouldn't be surprised to see Pietro confirmed as one of the full season drivers. The other driver that was announced is the silver-rated James Rowe. James has years of open wheel experience, but very little experience in sports cars, and I wouldn't expect him to be one of the full season drivers. As well, given the LMP2 regulations, there does need to be a bronze driver in the car for the entire season, so we're gonna have to wait and see who's confirmed as that driver for the entry. But looking back ahead to the future, if this LMP2 effort is indeed the first step in a potential GTP effort, then that's some pretty exciting stuff. What do you think, though? Do you think that we'll end up seeing Pratt Miller or the GTP customer effort in future years? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're down there, consider checking out the Off in the S's Patreon. With the support from patrons this past year, I was able to get out to more races and bring you more content from the track. 2025 is looking to be even bigger, and your support goes a long way to help me produce even more Imsa content. To check that out, you can head to patreon.com/offinthes's or click the first link in the description. A constant throughout the 2024 season was speculation over what Chip Ganassi Racing's future holds. Of course, over the summer it was announced that Chip Ganassi Racing would not return to running Cadillacs and were stuck searching for a new program. Not long after that news, it was confirmed that Wayne Taylor Racing would be coming on board to run the Cadillac effort, and soon after that, Meyer Shank Racing was brought back in at Acura, which may have been Chip Ganassi Racing's best option to stay on the GTP grid. There were other options that were floated out there, such as a potential privateer effort, or even perhaps a switch to a different class. But still, here we are at the end of the season, and we do not know what the future of Chip Ganassi Racing holds, and if they could be on the grid at all in Imsa next year. At this point, it looks very, very unlikely, with the full season and Michelin Endurance Cup entries already have been announced, but there is still a remote chance that they could be on the grid. Just hear me out for a minute. Now, remember how I said back at the State of the Sport that John Doonan was very excited about this final entry that they had yet to announce? Well, we also know that Genesis is looking to join the Imsa grid in the future, and reports say that they could even be interested in doing an LMP2 effort ahead of their GTP efforts. That is where I think Chip Ganassi Racing could come into play. They've been heavily rumored around this Genesis program, and this would be a pairing that just makes a lot of sense. If it turns out that a second Lamborghini isn't this exciting entry that we're expecting, then I sure hope that it could be a potential Genesis LMP2 effort with Chip Ganassi Racing, but I'll keep my fingers crossed. This year's Imsa Silly season has been pretty crazy. We've seen iconic teams like Chip Ganassi Racing on the outside looking in without a program. And the same can be said for a number of drivers. Perhaps none are more high profile than the multiple-time top-class champion Pipo Derani. The Brazilian driver emerged in recent years as not only one of the top Imsa drivers, but the top sports car drivers, period. And the multiple-time full-season Imsa champion has also captured 10 top-class wins and is a 3-time 12 Hours of Sebring winner. Earlier this year, it was announced that Pipo Derani would not be returning to Action Express Racing after a 6-year partnership together, and instead explore other opportunities, which led to much speculation over where he might end up. From the very beginning, it's been reported that it was likely he would find a landing spot in the World Endurance Championship. But even despite an expanded Cadillac effort in the WEC, Pipo was not announced as a driver for the effort, and is now faced with the possibility of not even having a top-class ride. Now, as I said, the Imsa Silly season's been a bit of a wild one. And in addition to Pipo searching for a new ride were many other fellow top-class drivers. But many of them were able to find homes, including Sebastian Bourdais, who landed in that World Endurance Championship effort. In fact, he's also doing a campaign stateside with Tower Motorsports in the LMP2 class. Former Cadillac driver Renger van de Zande was also announced to be switching to Meyershank Racing in their Acura, while former BMW driver Nick Yololi also made the move to Meyershank Racing. With all this, it really begs the question of what is left out there for Pipo on the grid. Now, I suppose it's possible he could still end up with a privateer effort somewhere, but the number of remaining seats that are available are pretty limited. Now, he was at a recent test, the Imsa sanction test at Daytona, and there he tested in the new DXDT Corvette. In that test, he was the fastest of the 4 drivers that made laps in the car, and it's fueled some questions as to whether Pipo could join the GTD class for the Rolex 24 in this effort. Now, why only in the Rolex and not the full season, you ask? Well, DXDT recently confirmed an Endurance Cup lineup of Charlie Eastwood, Sally Jolich, and Alec Udell. Editor Stu here, and while I'm editing this video, it has been announced that Robert Wickens will be joining DXDT Racing as one of their drivers for the Sprint Cup, the 5-race Sprint Cup calendar. A co-driver is yet to be announced for him, but Robert Wickens also joining up with DXDT. Now, they do, however, have an opening for that 4th driver for the Rolex 24, and I think Pipo would be a great fit for this ride and kind of make a lot of sense. Now, a more out there possibility, but one that could potentially come to fruition, is Pipo linking up with one of the newer manufacturers to enter the grid, being Genesis. This would make sense on a lot of levels. From the Genesis perspective, you get a very high caliber driver that can help you get this program up to speed quickly. Pipo also has previous experience in LMP2, which I just mentioned. Genesis may be looking to put forward an LMP2 effort next year. And then, of course, Pipo also brings a wealth of experience with him from his time in the World Endurance Championship and IMSA. He'd be a great get for Genesis. And while this is just pure speculation on my part, it is something that's interesting to think about. And with the silly season sorting everything out seemingly earlier and earlier with each year that passes, I don't think we're going to have to wait too much longer to see where he ultimately lands. Imsa's newest manufacturer, Cupra, was announced at Petit Le Mans to be eligible in the Michelin Pilot Challenge next year. Now, Cupra, which is a performance sub-brand of the Spanish manufacturer Seat, thanks to everyone who quickly jumped on my butchering of Seat in a previous video, will bring their Cupra Leon VZ TCR to the series, joining the likes of Hyundai, Audi, Honda, and Alfa Romeo on the grid. But the real question now is, will there be anybody running them at Daytona in January? The announcement of them being eligible to run in the Pilot Challenge next year came quite late. And while the car made a brief appearance at Indianapolis before doing some testing at Road Atlanta and ultimately being unveiled there, it may be unlikely that we see the car ready to go for Race 1 next year. Given the order lead time that's required to actually get the car here into North America in time for the season, I was told that in order for the car to be here for Race 1 of the season, that the order would need to be submitted, somewhere around the beginning to middle of November. Now, of course, this doesn't necessarily have to happen because there is already one of these cars that's race ready in North America, the one that was unveiled at Petit Le Mans. And John Miller of Patriot Race Engineering, who is the sales and parts distributor for the car in North America, said that that car that they unveiled and had on display at Road Atlanta is very much for sale. So with that in mind, it looks like best case scenario could be we have a single Cupra effort at Daytona. However, it may be more likely that we see Cupra join the Michelin Pilot Challenge grid as a mid-season addition. Editor Stu here once again, as also while I'm editing this video, it's been announced that Goo Racing will be running a Cupra in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge next year. My understanding is that it is a brand new car, and the team expects to have the car well in advance of the season debut at Daytona. If you want to learn more about the Cupra though, you can check out this video where I get into all the details. Huge shout out to all the Patreon supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offinthes or click that join button below. Once again though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.